introduce anything first. What's up with this?
College.
College.
They do. Okay. Nicole is the I don't know what my job is.
DCS is there.
Whoops, now we're recording.
All right, we are opening the public hearing on Go Guardian. We'll proceed to the Go Guardian discussion. Brooke, do you have a presentation for us on Go Guardian or discussion? Okay. I would love somebody to explain Go Guardian. I'm not going to win it.
So last year Brooke came and shared with you Go Guardian. Go Guardian was what she showed us that teachers can have on their computer with the students in the class and interact with them and keep them on task and such. When we started talking about this as a leadership team, we revisited the policy or the regulation that came out several years ago. Remember, we had the public hearing before we adopted the video surveillance policy. You may remember that a few years ago. We looked at that because there's something about remote surveillance software on a school supplied computing device, and because a teacher can view a student's computer screen when they're using Go Guardian, we felt that it would be appropriate to have another public hearing because this is a new program to us. It was not in place when we originally had the public hearing. So that's why we're here having a public hearing to talk about Go Guardian. Brooke can probably give you a better summary than I just did about what its function is in the classroom, and then hear from anyone. And ultimately we'll ask for a vote for the board to support the use of Go Guardian.
Do you want to give us a brief?
Yeah, I can, absolutely. So how we were using Go Guardian was, it's a piece of software that we use, and I believe in my presentation I had something about how in the old days when we had just tech labs, the monitors were all facing the teacher, but with these smaller computers, the kids are more mobile and they can be in small little groups, and a teacher cannot see that entire ongoing of what the computers are up to. But with Go Guardian, one of the functions of Go Guardian is we can see everything that a student is doing, seeing if they're on task, seeing if they're stuck, seeing if they're lost, all those things. And it's been extremely helpful to our teachers to find where our kids are, and very easy to be a classroom manager with that kind of software. It was only monitored during school hours, so we have it set up so that it was going on at school during the morning, 8 o'clock last year, and then this year would be 7:50, and then going off at 3:30. So if a child was going home onto their account at home, we wouldn't know about that. That's
2:30, not 3:30.
I'm sorry.
2:30, not 3:30.
Yeah,
okay.
2:30. So, yes. So it was just to be monitored during school hours. And that's really what it did.
Are there any questions, Ken?
And that all happens behind our firewall, right? So
Yes.
somebody can hack in
Correct.
after hours and set up a link where they could use computer.
I will
that's what
say,
firewalls.
I mean, that's more of a Josh type of question, Josh Berube question, but we have so many firewalls up, and so we're so locked down at this point. I would say that's extremely unlikely, and Go Guardian also does a lot of their own security.
So, go ahead.
What you just mentioned is we don't have exposure when the students are working on their accounts at home. That would include their accounts on their own devices?
Yeah.
Okay, so is that software synced to only be able to access our own devices?
Yes, their account is their account.
Based on their Google account.
Right, based on their Google account.
On their school card?
Yes. So if they have a Google account of their own, that wouldn't even, that's not what we're looking
And
at.
then if they're using their Google account to access school-related materials at home at 4 o'clock in the afternoon,
That's not, I mean, school hours that cuts off. And we're assuming you're using your account for school stuff. I mean, that's the intent of that. And I have spoken with a lot of the kids that, if you're looking at YouTube, during your lunchtime, that's not against the policy. I mean, that YouTube video has to be approved by us, but it's not like, it's only when you're in education that you have to worry about it. lunchtime is your own time, and if it's okay for the school, then it's okay for you, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Nate?
Yeah.
Last year there was a recent legislation that passed through the state, HB
Yep.
1174.
Well,
Is that correct?
well, we're
1612.
Thank you,
Yeah.
1612. So I assume this is within,
Yes.
and so that pertains to specific software that's collecting student data and what is okay. So
Right.
you've gone through all of that.
GoGuardian is on our list of being vetted, and I believe it's passed in other states, in
Okay.
California and Massachusetts, so we're next. And it could have passed already.
Okay.
It's for software that collects personal identifying information.
Okay.
Yeah, and it does.
Great.
But it'll get passed.
Okay. Is any of the stuff that is used, any of the, is there information that's recorded? I mean, I assume there is, but during let's say that the GoGuardian is watching, or I mean, it's really a tool for the teacher to watch the student, but is that recorded and stored somewhere, or is that just a real time? And
It's
then it's
recorded
kind of,
on our normal systems,
Yeah.
so it's under our umbrella.
okay.
Yeah.
And how long are those records retained?
I don't know. That's a Google question. You guys, do you have any idea? I mean, I think once they move on to middle school, onto high school, we expunge them or delete them.
That's the Google.
Yeah, and that's where all this information is.
So
So it's our normal information. Once that's gone, it's gone from everywhere.
But so then Google is having access to what our students are?
No, GoGuardian has access, gives her access to Google. So it's like a Google extension, the
Okay.
way it works in there.
Okay. So I feel like in my school district we're moving away from Google. Is Google passing the HB 1612?
Yeah, we
Google
are.
is clear.
So far, so good.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, I mean, it raises a good question, but so far, so good.
Okay. Well, somebody, I assume, at the SAU is on top of this.
Oh yeah, Josh has
Yes.
got. We've got a state.
We joined a consortium.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because otherwise every school is going to pay legal fees to have all of their applications and systems vetted.
Right.
So it's $1 a student for any district that wants to join, and then there's one
Okay.
legal firm vetting all the applications. So once it's vetted for one, we all have
Yeah.
access.
So that's the process that's going through right now. So GoGuardian has passed in other states. So we're next.
Awesome. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? The public is welcome to ask questions as well. This is a public hearing in regards to GoGuardian.
The most obvious, having not paid attention to this previously, although my child did, this is a GoGuardian is a software.
GoGuardian is software.
It's software?
It's software.
Okay, so it's a software.
Yeah.
You were utilizing it last year
Yeah.
for half a year.
So that's how you know you're doing it. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you answered a question that I had, so you could see, and the teacher could see.
Yeah.
How many other people within the school that just the
Just the teacher. So I'm an administrator, and I love math. So
you stuck to it.
So I would, because and Max knew that what I was doing, so I could go in and as soon as he was about to win the chess game, I would shut it down. So yeah, I'm fun like that.
He's going to show you chess.
I'm sorry.
He's going to show you chess.
Oh, awesome! That's awesome. But it's yeah, it was just during only the teacher that the child is in at that moment that they can look at.
How does it differentiate for the middle schooler who goes from one class to the other, and if they're logged in with the same device?
That's how it's that relationship with Google is so tight.
So the teacher only knows because they're logged into their Google class.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, so I remember last year you were opening up test tracks occasionally, that would just pop up on the side of the screen,
Yeah.
and you could have a one-on-one conversation with the computer with me.
Yeah.
Are the teachers going to be utilizing that?
So once the teacher has access through Google Classroom to Go Guardian, they can have a one-on-one conversation. If you have a friend in that class, they can't talk to me at the same time. Like, that's just between you and me. Not like Google Chat where you can all see what everybody else is doing. Yeah. Yeah, there's one-on-one.
Any other questions? All right. I'm going to close the public hearing and call to order the regular meeting. Ask if you join me, I don't know where oh, there it is, way back there. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would anybody mind if I turned off the air conditioners? All right.
Off or turn them on?
Turn them off. It's a little cool and they're really loud. Minutes of August 14th and 21st, 2019.
Are we moving the minutes of August 14th?
And the 21st? Or
Do you want to do it separately or do you want to?
you can, either way.
Let's kill them one at a time.
Okay, so we are on, I need a second.
Second.
We are on the minutes of August 14th, 2019. Any changes, corrections?
Yes.
What do you have?
I was there. I was left off the attendance list.
Okay.
Thank you.
Were you really?
I was there. I think we have video to prove it. And I had another one. Yeah, maybe my other one is for the next one.
On the
Any other changes or corrections to the 21st?
On the-
Or the 14th,
on the
excuse
last
me.
page of the 14th,
Yeah.
the motion at the top of the page, you just added a
Zitch.
Been called worse today.
Thank you very much.
Any other? All in favor of the minutes of the 14th as corrected?
I would move the minutes of August 21st.
Second.
Corrections, changes?
Yes. I was there.
Were you ready?
I was.
Really?
I think we have video. And there were a couple more that were a little further down on this one, I think I had. All right. One of them was that the vote on, so at the bottom of page 3, motion made by Mr. Langlois. I know that the vote on that was not all in favor. I know there was, it was at least I think 3-1. I'm not sure if there was a fifth vote, but it was definitely at least 3-1.
Yeah, we'll take a faith.
Yeah, thank you.
And then under C, under transportation, do we want to put the votes on the amendments?
Right, C under transportation.
Like an amendment was made by the motion by Nate Oxnard to investigate. Like we should have the results of amendments and votes. Those should be in there.
Section D, the student handbook. Do you know who made the motion to accept?
Page 2 under D. It says Ken seconded it, but it doesn't say who moved it.
I'm inclined to think that it is, but they typically try to move things along.
We'll look at the tape again.
And then there was one more, which was this is the top of page 4. There's a motion to come out of non-public made by me and seconded by me. I don't think that I could do both of those. So I don't remember which one I did, but I did one of those. I didn't do both of them.
Again, I typically make the motions.
I bet I seconded that one, and Zach made the motion.
And under 5, under the Concord High School section, if I wanted to make sure that the minutes reflected that we had been told by the administration that school year was going to start without a principal, and they were looking for an interim principal. Under 5, page 3.
Principal.
Without a principal. And they were looking for an interim principal. So should we table these until our next meeting? You want to make those corrections and throw them back at us? Or?
Yeah,
Okay.
can do that.
Thank you. All right. Public comments.
He's spread. So it's kind of funny. Like Nate had to remind everybody that he was actually at the meeting. Pulling the same thing. And I brought with me today my living example, embodiment of a high schooler who, although he no longer is their responsibility, he is still the responsibility of the school board, as is every high schooler. And well, I don't see it on the agenda, and I paid attention last time. As a parent, although Concord High School is not my personal issue, as I have no contact and no students there, I am concerned as a parent, especially as of last night reading, the 2,700 people that last tally that had signed the petition, expressing their interest at having the principal removed and having the superintendent removed. And 2 years ago, it was on your goals that you'll be setting tonight to address the fact that not everyone agreed with Concord, and given all the issues that they have going on, I seriously think as a parent, and again, it's not my personal, when you go through fantastically, that is something that still should be really considered. Not everyone is thrilled with it. I will speak from experience. Making a different choice for my son was absolutely, positively, 100% the appropriate thing to do in the best choice of my life. So, people who like it, that's fine, but you still have high schools that you're responsible for. Just because they left this building does not mean they're not the responsibility of the district. You don't have to.
Any other public comments? No? All right. Consent items, do we have any?
Nope.
Agenda review, are there any changes to the agenda? Mr. Oxnard.
I had mentioned or requested last time about the idea of a YMCA and an after-school program. I was wondering if we could get that on the agenda somewhere.
As a presentation or as a discussion?
As a discussion, as an introduction of an idea that I could maybe not necessarily pitch, but sort of talk about, and as an opening, yes, discussion.
Is that something you would prefer to do tonight or put on the next agenda for next time?
Maybe at least just bring it up tonight, and I guess bring it up as an idea that the board might consider and gauge the thoughts of the board as far as moving forward or not. I don't know. Would you rather have more information as part of a presentation initially before?
If the board is open to it, we could have an initial discussion under informational, but I would want I would want something,
Some information.
yeah, something that's not just
Yeah.
entirely hypothetical.
Okay.
Do you have details at this point, or do you want to?
That's
ask
fine.
for
I will
next
bring,
meeting?
next time I will bring more information, and then we can put it as that, so that I will
I will
have
put-
information next time. If
Do
we
we add that to the
can
agenda?
get it on the agenda, then I will bring the information. How about that?
Okay.
Excellent.
Because I'm gonna be out of town for the next meeting, can you send me that information?
Sure.
Prior to?
Sure.
Or get it uploaded in the,
Yep, I'll do all that.
Anything else to change on the agenda? All right, I would entertain a motion on the Go Guardian software.
I guess just to clarify, while we're waiting for that to be approved or cleared, through that HB 1612, is it appropriate to pass it today? Or remove it today, or remove it pending approval of HB?
It's not pending approval of HB 1612, it's being vetted and approved as a program that can be used in school. They will abide by it.
Should that be included in a motion?
You could put it in the motion, it wouldn't hurt it.
But I think it's a long-term process. There's so many apps and programs that it's sort of a long-term thing, and if it may be a year or two until they're all. So if you hold it that long,
Right. The question is, are you going to make a motion that says pending approval,
Well,
or
So if it hasn't
use it
been
with-
vetted by the state, are you able to use it until the state says it's either doesn't pass or does pass?
We have kept, I think, most of our applications in place pending review. I think pretty much all the schools have. It's brand new, and we're sending everything we're using. We have a whole list that's going through the process, but I don't think schools have stopped using.
So the SAU is sorting out the legalities. Okay, so then I would move to approve the usage of the Go Guardian software.
Second.
any discussion on Go Guardian? All in favor?
Aye.
Concord High School student reports. We don't have a high school student here. They haven't set that up yet, so I think we can touch base and have them come meeting after next, usually. They come every month, right?
Want me to email and check on that?
Yeah, it'd be great.
They may need to wait for school to start first before they have something to talk about.
Yeah, they've only been in school for a week. All right. Continuing business, board reports, PTO update.
Nothing really. We have our first meeting on September 17th, and we have started planning the town migration.
Awesome. Any questions for PTO?
Awesome job on the budget.
Yeah.
You too, guys. Financial.
I don't smell like a hamburger anymore. Maybe.
That's a shame.
I know. Staff report, there is none. Executive board report, we have not met. We meet next week, I believe. Principals reports. Ms. Libby.
Just had a lot. All right.
It'll all stop at some point.
So this update is for August 22nd through September 4th. Mr. Green and I worked with Mrs. Flanagan and Mrs. Gordon back in before school was in session. They are respectively a 6th and 7th grade teacher. We were unable to send middle school folks to the responsive classroom middle school section of that they were hosting this summer in Concord because the session got full very quickly. By the time we were ready with our funding and everything like that, we got shut out. So we decided to order the responsive advisory books. We worked with Mrs. Flanagan and Mrs. Gordon and set up the beginning of the school year expectations. So we worked with them, they brought the plans to their teams, and they've worked with their advisory team to roll out responsive advisory for 6th and 7th grade. 8th grade Magnet has taken on some of the portions of the philosophy behind the responsive advisory. And so that's up and running as we speak. We did 2 very productive teacher staff back to school days on Monday and Tuesday, the 26th and 27th. In the back to school meetings that we had, we reviewed policies, including the student safety policy about bullying. We discussed the suicide prevention mandate that was passed this summer, very late in the summer, SB 282, which is a law requiring that schools identify and respond to signs of suicidal risk. So we've started that difficult conversation. DCS is very good about taking good care of their kids, and so it will not be difficult for us to put into place any training and things that need to happen for this. We spent a good amount of time reviewing the importance of social emotional learning. We talked about ACEs and trauma-informed classroom practices, and we'll continue that work throughout the course of the school year. It's also an SAU-wide goal working on social emotional learning. The back to school open house and the barbecue were very well attended, including the information sessions. Mr. Green did a wonderful job for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, going through some of the expectations, especially for our 6th graders coming into the middle school, what's expected, ways to communicate, getting on Alma and Google Classroom and Remind, and their lockers and things like that. So that was very well attended, and their parents were very well behaved. And so it was good to have our kids back in the hallways and the classrooms. On Wednesday, August 28th, was the start of school, and went off without a hitch, and nobody has jumped on the stools in the lobby. Nobody's knocked over a plant yet, so everybody really likes and the kids sit on them all the time. Either they're waiting for somebody or they've been very well utilized. Our cross-country team, our volleyball team, and our boys and girls soccer practices are in full swing. Our first soccer game is tomorrow, and it will be at home versus Pembroke. Our first volleyball game will be next Tuesday, the 10th of November, and it is an away game at Dover. And September.
Keep going, we're going to be done.
June already. So thank you for that check-in. September 10th, next Tuesday.
The year was flying by.
Again, that will be at Dover. It's an away game. And Deerfield will be hosting the first cross-country meet next Wednesday, September 11th, from 4:30 to 6. And then lastly, we have our musical rental night tomorrow night from 6 to 8 for any students 4th to 8th that are interested in renting a musical instrument. So that's what's going on at DCS.
Question?
Go ahead.
Just curious about the sort of the overall plan, I guess. So you're talking about the middle school and the responsive advisory, starting to get into advisory. Is that eventually going to make it into the classrooms? Do you see the middle school teachers also carrying on their responsive classroom sort of mentality or philosophy that is starting in the lower grades? Or is it going to be mostly an advisory focus?
That's a good question.
Time purposes, given the current scheduling, for this year, it was mostly just being an advisory setting. 6th grade incorporates it. 6th grade has that freedom to create their schedule on their own, essentially. They are implementing more of that throughout their schedule with team time and things like that. So right now, the constraints of the schedule is 7-8 weeks.
Okay.
Just to quickly bring up that Mr. Grieve did do his bullying presentation to the middle school students this past week as well. And talked about the handbook and the paper that needs to be signed for all middle school students to come back. So that happened this week.
Just two things. First, I meet with all middle school on a yearly basis and go over that. But the report will go out on Friday.
Yes, the policy is going out on Friday. Yes. We have paper copies to send to the student, and we have a spot for them to sign the book.
Could I ask both the superintendent and principal? We had talked about you guys doing a presentation on the Harvard retreat you guys did.
Yep. Next meeting.
Next meeting.
Yep.
All right. Awesome.
Kristen and I are pretty.
I'm gonna miss all of this.
It'll be recorded. It'll be recorded.
It's not a vacation.
Oh, it's bad.
You'd rather be here.
All right. Excellent. I'm excited for that. Anything else for the principal? Okie dokie. We are moving on to Curriculum Review Board. Mr. Oppenheimer.
No meeting yet.
We are now on to school board goals. and I was just going through my notes, and I have the wrong notebook with me, so I don't have my notes in front of me.
So the language that you have is what Nate sent me. So some of you may have different notes that you took that day that you need to supplement this, or Nate may have captured everything beautifully. So as you please, this is the first draft.
So let's start. Why don't we start at the beginning and see if we like what we have or if we want to add anything to it. I'd like to adopt these, or whatever this comes out to, in this meeting if possible. Curriculum. Implement a system for supporting and promoting instructional innovation by DCS faculty. That was the discussion around some sort of a reward system, which was interesting. I enjoyed that discussion. Everybody okay with that one? Yeah.
I hate we're moving so quickly here that I hate to sort of, but I don't want to derail everything, but I feel like in light of our last meeting, I feel like there is sort of a larger discussion that needs to happen.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if this is the time to bring it up, or I can wait. But it ties to goals, I think, and so.
Well, we don't have to necessarily vote on these if there's more discussion that we were interested in having, either in public or non-public, or whatever it is that you're discussing.
Are you talking just this first one?
It's kind of bigger than that, and can I just kind of throw it out there, and then maybe we just put it aside and we'll come back to it. It came. I think Gigi brought up a very good point. At our last meeting, there was sort of a back and forth, and Gigi made the point. The point of that meeting was to get through the handbook, and there are these sort of philosophical things that started coming in, and it wasn't the time or place to discuss that, and I can understand that, so we moved on. Yet those philosophical differences, I think, are there, and I feel like until we as a district or as a board go through some sort of a strategic plan process, which is expensive and time consuming, the voice of the community, I think, is limited to the few parents that either do email the administration or come and speak up at public comments during our meetings. And I think because of that, we, the elected members, are representing the community as we look at our school. And so I feel like there's a larger question of we saw kind of this difference in opinion or in vision, and Gigi made the point, let's deal with this later. And that's an important, we need to, but at the same time, I don't feel like we ever deal with it. I feel like that has been pushed down the road for a year and a half. Like you made the point at the last meeting, we okayed the handbook in the same language last year. And we did that because it was the handbook meeting and it was time to move on and okay the handbook and move on. But there are these philosophical questions that I think the community has. I think we represent the community. My question is, what is the forum by which we have this discussion? We haven't really jumped on doing any sort of a strategic plan yet. It's expensive and it takes a lot of time. How does the school, in a structured, moderated, facilitated way, hear the input from the community and use that in a constructive way to look at its program and think critically and reflect on how we move forward with education in this town? So that's a huge question, a huge issue, but I feel like we've been pushing it down the road for a long time, and I don't know how to start to dig into it. So I don't know. I'm sorry, that's kind of like a grenade, but
But I think to add to what Nate is saying is that conversation should also be part of what's driving the goals in general. Right? I mean, that basically.
yeah, and so we can come up with these board goals, but I feel like that's not, like we said last time, it's not the school goals. We can't really define the school goals. This was a discussion we had 3 meetings ago or 3 months ago. Like, these are the board goals, which are different from the school goals. But are they tied together or not? When we talked about this last time, it was like, well, we'll have some sort of a collaborative process where we'll kind of come up with these goals together. The whole summer's gone by, that hasn't happened. So, we're looking at, here are our board goals, but in actually digging into it, I feel like it's just going to kick down, the road another year. So, and then we'll look at the handbook again next year and whoa, it hasn't been talked about. So my question is, how are we going to actually, what is the forum? What is the correct forum? And this is maybe a question for the superintendent. What is the correct forum by which we have this difficult discussion about how the administration hears the input from the community? And I think, for the time being, we are the community. We're the voice of the community right now.
Go ahead.
So I think the intention was to start with the NELMS study, which we did. We did the NELMS report. There's a 3-year plan coming out of that. I think it's important for us to hear from each of you on the school board. We've been talking a lot about objectives and key results. So, the goals are these big overarching things, but what are the objectives and what are the key results? So I think it's important for us to hear, maybe it's important for you as well to hear from each individual board member, what is it you're looking for, what do you want the results to be, before we can decide or figure out what the next steps need to be. I think, I don't know that I'm clear with each individual board member how you feel and what you're looking for. That would help me to determine the next steps. And it may be that, okay, it may turn into something that's not going to be solved in a year, because if there are really big philosophical differences, then we have to somehow get the community more involved.
But I also, in the difference, it's not the opinions of the individual board members that matter, it's the consensus of the board. So it's that discussion that the board has at their level, and we can have different opinions, but when the discussion leads, as soon as 3 of us say this is the way we want it to be, then, so it's not really an individual board member thing, other than trying to maybe wrangle the squirrels.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's what the board says as a whole, not.
But I agree with Nate that there has to be a public input element to that, to make sure that, we may have our own opinions and what we, yeah. In what we think, our own individual visions of what's going forward, but they may not necessarily reflect the thoughts of the public as a whole, not fully reflect. And I understand where you're going with that, because my first thing was that first goal, part A, is a rather generic, very, very wide goal. I understand why we're doing it, but I was kind of having the same thoughts of where does this fit? And the rest of these, part B, and the rest of these going down, are pretty specific. To your point of having objectives and key results and that sort of thing. I think we can definitely implement the rest of these goals here, but something like a reward system, as explained in this first goal, where does that fit in that strategic plan? What are we trying to achieve with that? I would like to see a little bit more definition about what we're trying to achieve with that goal. And I wasn't sure if this was the right time to bring it up or not, or if that, do we accept that goal, put it on there, and then go as trying to figure that out? Do we define it better after the fact? So I don't know how we want to deal with that. So I'm on the same pages.
I just have a clarifying question. Does the NELMS report include community input on it, or is it comes in the form of
A survey.
okay.
And then there were individual meetings with parents who were interested in coming in. Yeah, each one.
And there were quite a few meetings. There were probably 50 parents who came in, something like that. No? Okay. So
would you consider that kind of like a needs assessment?
do you have the report?
Progress,
It's almost like a mini NEAS visit, kind of much slower, not as involved process.
Like, is there easy data to look at from that online, like progress, perception, culture?
Yeah, there are categories. It's broken down. They gave a lot of recommendations and some of those, and that's sort of what I was referring to, that the middle school and the administration took that report. We had a consultant come in and work with us and help us sort of organize that report into like what's the low hanging fruit we can attack right now this year, which there were some things done. There's been ongoing work, some things that have changed, and there was a 3-year plan that was developed from that report. So I think we have to, Nate asked to have that put in the drive so that it was more easily accessible, which I think Kathy did for you. I think we have to go, we almost have to revisit that. We have to have Kristen talk about her 3-year plan because there are new board members, and if that's not the direction that you want us to keep going, or if there are going to be, if you're considering making some sea changes, that needs to be determined sooner rather than later if it's something that you're expecting.
So, I think, Ken, to speak to your point, in terms of 1A, you're correct. It's really big.
Yeah.
And if I'm thinking about kind of the sense of where that came out of, might have been a bit of like the board wanting to see action and finding a positive way to reward action. And the root of that might be in the speed at which change happens, which is a challenge in the school. We totally understand that. But I think it might speak to the sense of the board that you have a board interested in supporting change based on the studies that you guys have had and the direction that we've discussed over the last couple of years, and wanting to see that road, wanting to move down that road quicker, I think is where 1A comes from. And it does speak to the high level discussion of, you know, what we're up to. How do we want to deal? We're looking at the goals right now, and we have a draft in front of us. I think 2, 3, and 4 are pretty straightforward.
Yeah, this is good. I mean, there's language 4A, I think we just need to go, man.
Why don't we take the low fruit, the low hanging fruit off the table first?
So, the way 4A is written,
Yes.
not crazy about it. I would just,
Decide whether the board intends to terminate the Concord contract prematurely.
not crazy about that.
The language on it?
Right, so I think it should just be more of decide how the board intends to proceed with high school education post-Concord start. Or at the...
Post implies that we're leaving.
No, at the conclusion of our contract. Doesn't imply that we're leaving, it just, what are we doing?
And you think that's realistic for this year?
I think...
Without getting things like numbers and prices and what options and availability?
I think we need to, collectively, we have, 4 years left? No, it's the fourth grade. 4 years left. We need to start figuring out the plan. The plan is going to be to stay with Concord. Ideally, I think 2 years before we get to that point. I think in the next 2 years, we really do need to know, are we intending to continue with Concord? Are we intending to look for another school? Are we intending to have 2 schools of record? What are the intentions? And I also think that's only fair to Concord as well, for their own planning. So my mindset is in the next 2 years, we should know what the plan is going to be. It'll create certainty for families in this community, and I don't think that's an unrealistic thought for us to have.
Go ahead.
Are you... I totally agree with what you're saying, that yes, in the next couple of years we should have a better picture of where we're going to go. But there are so many players in that conversation. It's not just us in Concord, it's also other schools that we might be talking to or not. And all of that is so broad that, I mean, for starters, this is a current year goal. right? This is for our goals for this year. And so I guess the way that wording ended up was that because really what's within our power to actually do this year, all we can do is vote on whether we're going to stay with a Concord contract or not. I mean, that's the level of discussion we can really achieve this year. And if we agree that we're going to stick out the Concord contract, then I think that opens, like you're saying, up to, but that means even letting Concord know whether we're going to be, I think, sticking with them beyond the 4 years requires talking to other schools. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but it's so much more involved that I don't know that, it's not going to be a this year goal.
Is it unreasonable for us to have a goal that extends for 2 years?
Okay.
I think we've done
Sure.
it before in the past.
I see.
I think the space needs thing was multi-year.
Yep.
Gotcha.
But I think actually you can do it both ways, because with the current, the recent happenings at Concord have stirred controversy within our own
Right.
community. I think this is actually still a relevant question in light of those recent controversies. That those controversies, I think, are viable grounds that we could terminate early if we wanted to. So I think this is actually still just in that narrow scope,
Right.
of saying, because of what happened, do we want, is Concord no longer a good fit for us? Do we want to terminate?
I agree that I feel like I'm hearing voices in the community are saying we should go somewhere else next year. Right.
2 years.
I know that. But my point is that the community is not aware of kind of the current situation, and they don't know that. And so even just making this a sort of a short, easy goal, like reaffirming that we're going to stick it out for 4 more years, if that's what we choose to do, then at least we can make that public that we're not going somewhere else next year. We're going to be in Concord for 4 more years. Right. That would be some certainty that people currently aren't aware of, I think.
Right. And I think if we were to modify this language to say, given recent events, are we still committed to Concord for the time being? But I think it does. I think it is also a good idea to have that multi-year goal of contract or high school evaluation. And I think we need to start with identifying what are the values that are important to the community, and how do those fit with where we're sending our kids.
We've had informational, and we've had forums, and we've heard from people, and there's a continued consensus around that there are people who would like to have school options.
Yeah.
There are people who really like Concord. Yeah. It's a continual conversation that's happened in this community for
20 years.
40 years. And
when was the last time we had a forum?
We had a high school forum
because I think the percentage.
Right. So
I agree that the appetite for that is always here. It fluctuates as far as
it always moves. And in terms of our arrangement with Concord, at any point this board can vote to opt out. There's no requirement or there's no clauses that say you have to do it with cause. So it's absolutely at the discretion of this board to opt out. You get 2 years notice. Once you submit the letter, it's 2 years from June. But since that forum that we had a couple of years ago, the board has talked to other schools. We have heard from Co-Brown. We have heard from Concord. The subcommittee went and we sat with the board members up in Concord. I think the informational side of things that you guys, there's two issues. There's the let's gather information. Let's start the process of getting the information together and having it all in front of us before any kind of discussion or decisions are made. And then the other side is what does this community want? What has been the continued history? What's the long-term ramifications of what happens? Because it is we've had 20 consistent years, almost, well, 16 at this point, consistent years of a high school without any issues of kids not having a school to go to, which is the situation that put us in Concord in the first place. And there are very few people who still have kids in the system, or know people who have kids in the system who remember that. So
I remember.
I remember as well.
right, and it's a huge beastly discussion, but I think that starting on the informational side of things, where we actively start talking to people and gathering information rather than coming to any conclusions,
Well,
is a realistic first step.
and I guess my mindset is knowing what we're gonna do in the next 2 years, and the next 2 years, we're gonna be 2 years from the end of the contract. So once you get to, 2 years, to the last 2 years of the contract, your opt-out is irrelevant. It's already
It's,
set.
you already said.
You're already set. So that's why I think we do need to know what we're gonna do within, say, the next 12 to 24 months, is because that clock is ticking up against us, and it's got a hard stop on that candidate. And I'd much rather know 2 years in advance, this is our intentions, than be backed up against the wall and then find out that you can't find another high school that wants to receive your students. And
So we definitely need to continue the process forward. For this year, I think we're in the informational phase. I think we need to gather information from all of the different options out there. And I think it's the responsibility of the board to reach out and have discussions and say, what does it look like? What does it look like for us to stay in Concord? What does it look like for us to do some sort of a different arrangement? What are the prices associated with different high schools? Every different high school has a different price. So decide whether the board intends to terminate the Concord contract prematurely. I get where you're going with that, but it's maybe gathering information on the next best decision, or begin to gather information on what the decision is for high school going forward.
also, this community expects us to start that conversation.
Yeah, we've said we're doing it, and we actively are. It's not going to be a short process.
No.
It's going to be some serious heavy lifting.
But but 2 years, I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation for
Did it?
us.
Okay, so did anybody write down the gather information on? Did you grab that, Candy? By any chance?
Those little lyrical brilliances.
Zach's?
No, gather information on future
Possible next steps.
possible next steps for high school.
What Zach said that I wrote down was how the board intends to proceed with high school education at the conclusion of our Concord contract.
That sounds great.
That's what he said.
Can we
I
cross
said
that?
that?
Can we
Yeah.
cross
No,
out?
I didn't.
Can we
You did.
replace A with that?
Let's say Jen said it.
So do you want to send that, because I put, the board discussed how to move forward with high school and determine what they will be doing and when to determine that.
Right.
So all of that is great. I totally agree with it. But it's still very vague. It's like, what I put, this wording came from the idea that, I don't know, it's like
Then
my
you
brain
want
works. I want, like, what are we actually going to, what is an actionable item by the end of this year?
Well,
and so what I'm hearing is sort of like, let's talk about
Well,
it.
no.
But what are we going to do?
Here's an actionable item. Unless this board actively votes
Yeah.
out of the contract, we are there for 4 years.
You can make a
I have-
motion right now to bail out.
I have not heard
Yeah, I know.
anybody
I know that.
have any intention to change. I have no intention to make that motion. I don't hear it. We're at Concord.
Okay. So I can put that out online. Like, we're there in Concord for 4 years.
Or until someone wants to make a motion.
Right?
We have 4 years left in the contract, and we are going to begin.
Isn't it worth having that vote? I mean, I feel like that's a valid goal where we should be able to give our some certainty to.
It would be a non-binding vote, though.
No, I know.
You could vote in 2 months, and I changed my mind. I want out.
Okay.
I
All right.
still think this needs to be looked at in light of current events.
Okay.
You can say right now, by saying right now that we're in Concord for the next 4 years, you are committing us to.
I'm not committing to anything. My term ends next year, and whoever comes on, or if I stay,
I
it
get
could
that.
change.
But right now, you're expressing a commitment that we're gonna stay there. I just think in light of current events, if we hear from the public that they're screaming, there's no way we're sending our kids there.
And we can move 20 minutes later on that. I'm sorry, we need 24 hours supposed to meet, but we can move it meeting 24
And
hours.
I get that, but I don't want to put the optics out there that we
I
are
don't-
Yes, Patty.
definitely staying
I-
and will never change.
I would just like us to be cautious at this point when we're talking about the current events that are happening, because there's an investigation that's not concluded, and coming from someone who has been through their share of controversial issues, some of the things in the media, some of the things from the parents, some of the things in print, frankly, were absolutely not true. I had no idea where people came up with it. It was never said, it was never done. So I just think it's dangerous for us to assume that what people are saying and printing is accurate until the investigation is concluded. And
Completely agree. I don't want to get us locked into a position where we're
There's no lock.
forced one way or the other.
We're not locked in.
Legally, I know, I get that.
We're not locked in for 2 years. For the next 2 years, we have flexibility.
I get that. Legally, but from a perception point of view, from the public, if the public believes we're gonna stay there for 4 years and they don't have an opportunity to change because they don't have the information about it, that could make life very difficult for us.
I think we're getting to the point where it would probably be appropriate to say the board is starting a discussion about future high school, future high school in Deerfield, and current contract with Concord requires 2 years notification prior to executing the contract. It does happen early. We have 4 years remaining. The intent of the board is to have a decision on what will be happening within the next 24 months. I don't know. And you can say that, and then
So we don't know what's going to happen for 2 years. But for the time being, we're stuck. We're not stuck. We're in Concord. I can totally do that. That's good. But
it sounded a little sarcastic.
I don't know. I feel like it's perpetuating this kind of this uncertainty.
So that,
Versus just saying, certainly as of the moment, I don't know, we are committed to Concord for 4 years. We are committed to finishing out our contract for the moment. This is what the feeling of the board is.
the reality of it is a motion starts at 2 year clock. So if you want to start a 2 year clock,
Okay.
it's a motion and a 2 year clock starts.
Yeah.
And that can be the will of the board, but the board needs to.
Okay. I can say
We're also
something.
talking about extremely expensive
Yeah.
decisions here.
100%.
So, I really don't want to.
I'm not making a motion.
Okay, I really don't want to get out on a limb on this one into the hypothetical land. And I also think that we should wait. I think that the investigation that's being done in Concord hopefully gives clarity to everyone in terms of what's going on and the proper decisions. So,
So what should the goal say?
I kind of like what Patty read off.
Great.
Is everybody okay with what Patty read?
Could you read it one more time?
from Zach's lips.
What can I say?
How the board intends to proceed with high school education at the conclusion of our Concord contract.
I feel like you should.
Good.
I think it is that.
Very good.
Everyone okay with changing the A to D?
Yeah, that's great.
Yes?
I'm sorry, could you read it this one more time?
Absolutely. How the board intends to proceed with high school education at the conclusion of our Concord contract.
Do you want to put a verb in there, like decide how?
It's not really a goal the way it's written.
Yeah, I knew it was.
Zach said it.
Well, it's very nice, Zach, but.
So just put a decide in front of it. It would be good.
Yeah.
It wasn't
And
like,
then,
It wasn't, yeah, you were just, it was off the cuff.
that's how I roll.
I think Zach also makes a good point about, I don't think that 4 years is too early to begin the exploratory work, because it is so hard to get, the biggest villain is misinformation, and it's so easy to get misinformation out. It's so hard to get accurate information out, and there are different sets of information that need to go into this decision. One is all of so what schools we take what percentage of our kids and to what cost. So that's one piece of information. And then another piece of information is kind of that values piece of like what schools do we believe have values that reflect the things that we are looking for in our community. And then the other piece of that is really what are the pros and cons of having one school of record versus many school of records. Like really having the community have a thorough understanding. Because I believe students could speak to that well as parents, but even more so students could speak to that. So I feel like it's like a three-pronged information gathering that we would need to do before we ever ask the question of like, hey, what do you think? Because otherwise we ask the question that's written there, if people would just vote on their gut reaction of whatever the latest word on the street is, which is not always accurate.
Yeah.
So, sounds like you need to be on the high school committee, I think.
So can we get, so I feel like 1A is done. 1, collect community input in the form of a March ballot question. We all kind of consensus around wanting to see some sort of a question that asks about the fiscal impacts of.
Yeah, I think that gives us time to craft it, right? But I also think is there a B and C below?
Well, how in detail do you want to get? I mean,
Well,
we're kind of.
But should the goal also include the timeline and what? So like so say that's 2 years worth of goals there, right? I think we've all kind of put in 12 months worth of goals. In 12 months, should we be discussing potential options for high schools with looking at their current contractual costs for these pounds of tuition annual? We should have, is that a reasonable expectation to have that data in front of us? So they can say
12 months? It's not super, we certainly don't find it.
no.
We can find the information out. I wouldn't want to mislead the taxpayers by making the assumption that our cost is what they're charging other districts, and then we put out, would you want to go to Co-Brown if it was an extra $500,000, and come to find out it's either $1 million or $200,000.
But I don't necessarily think that's the part. I'm thinking the board needs to look at it and say
that's still under the information we're gathering.
Yeah.
So I don't think we need to add additional bullet points. I think we can have the discussion around that. Could we also drop the word alternatives off of that and just say high school? Because we're just considering high school. We're not necessarily alternative implies we're doing something different.
High school evaluation.
Right.
I think an important piece of information that you would need pretty early on would be the percentage of students that Concord is requiring us to send in order to remain our school of record. Because that was something at the last round of negotiations, parents were interested in having more options, and we went back and forth quite a bit and got to the point where Concord said, if we don't get this percentage of students, we're not going to be your high school of record. So that would be a good piece of information. Like, look, is that the current, with the current board, people have changed. Is that still the feeling, or are you willing to have a conversation about that?
Can we put it out there? The definition of what a school of record is, what it means, and not only just the actual definition, but the other implications of commitment. What it implies about the relationship with the school. So busing and policies and
if you have a school of record, any student from your school is automatically entitled to go to that school. But once you start saying, well, we're going to send you 20%, you 20%, you 20%, then it becomes, well, we know X school is looking for our top 10% of our kids, and this school is looking for our track stars, and this school is looking, and then we're getting what's left. It's not a nice way to say it, but I don't know how else to say it. it was a horrible situation that I went through with parents crying on the phone that nobody would accept their child, and you don't want to be back in that
No,
situation.
absolutely not. But, so the school of record could be the equivalent of this fault.
Yes.
Is it appropriate or inappropriate at this time, if we're gonna continue down this path, which it seems like we're gonna start the conversation, should we, at what point do we notify the board in Concord that we are going to start looking at what our,
We already did.
we have,
We had that meeting when we discussed what we were going to go up there with our talking points. And said we're 4 years at the end, towards the end of the contract, and the board is aware of that and paying attention to it.
okay,
And asked, that was,
should it be more formally disclosed?
this is a public meeting.
But we haven't reached out.
Right, to their board, this is a,
That was their board. So,
So you put them on notice. saying-
yeah, we said we're aware that we're 4 years short from the end of our contract, and we have had a lot of feedback that a lot of students have had a great time in Concord, and we are interested in how you guys feel about Deerfield. So, not going to get too detailed in discussions, but I feel like we should be dealing with our goals here rather than actually doing them right now. So, physical plant. Can we move away from the high school one and just move to the physical plant one?
Can I ask one question before we go? Sorry, Jim.
No.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, do we want anything that is more concrete, or we're going to intentionally be we're just going to talk about it? There's no concrete, like, it's a thing to check off in June or next June, whenever it is, that we've actually accomplished something, other than we've talked about it, which we just did. So we could check off that box right now. Do we realistically think we could achieve something?
Well,
And should that be on our goals or not?
What is it that you see us achieving?
In 1 year, I don't know. I mean,
There's a couple of things we can do. We can negotiate, renegotiate, and extend. We can negotiate with other high schools. We can have multiple options, all of which take an enormous amount of work, and we're also talking about a building.
Okay.
So, do we want to put any of those
In writing, probably not.
I don't at this
No.
point.
The March ballot question, you think that should still be on there? Do you think it's realistic to get a March?
We can have a discussion about.
Okay.
Not
I think,
tonight.
yeah, I think Gigi has a good point. I don't want to put that out there prematurely with too much misinformation rather than having correct information out there.
Right.
But that's, can we get that done by March? Maybe
Well,
we can.
whatever the question winds up being, I think it's worth leaving on there so we may consensus around an entirely different question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Physical plant, DCS building edition. We all want to keep the ball moving on this one with the fantastic presentation you guys are going to have next week or 2 weeks. Or whatever. Is there anything anybody wants to change to 3?
I think this is, we have a hard timeline on that. We're gonna put a warrant on the March article. We need to really, we have till, January 9th, 10th-ish. But we need to know this before the end of the year. This needs to be done before the end of the year, which means we need to start crafting that article because there is gonna be money tied to it. Part of that. So realistically, that becomes a very urgent thing. We're gonna properly put an article together. We need to decide what function we're going to do it in. If it's going to be for engineering and plans, we almost need to put out a RFP to get cost for the engineering so that we can write a warrant article to fund that. So and we want that RFP to be out there for a while, right? So, this is a next month thing at this point, realistically. So that it can go out in October and come back in November, decide in December, and it's warrant article in January.
So we should have that. Is everybody okay with moving forward with that part?
Raise my hand again.
In spirit, yes. I'd like to change the language, the actual language of goal a little bit to be able to.
What would you like?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
All right. You figure it out, Nate. What do you have?
It's tied back to number one, where I don't want to go spend a lot of money even on a design with an architect if we can't accurately represent what the community is envisioning for education in our school if we can't have this conversation that we haven't gotten to.
Okay.
So I like the idea, but I don't want to just build a building for the sake of building a building. I want to have a picture about what education is happening.
All right. Do you have language you want to change on it?
Getting there.
Can we talk about communication in the meantime?
Yes.
Continue to offer community forums as a way of educating and engaging in pressing concerns. Bullying. We had question marks. What other options did we want to talk to as a community forum?
I think technology.
Technology.
You know, I follow the SRO officer who's constantly putting things out for parents to be aware of. You know, your kid is, you know, how to find this in the Snapchat. If you go on, you know, things like that that parents aren't aware of and their kids are doing on social media. They're
Yeah, that's great.
so far ahead of us.
Right. That's almost more.
I like that.
That'd be great. I'm not sure if the board should be doing that or the administration should be doing that. But we would happily sponsor the forum.
But it could be on the list. Yeah, I think that's great. I think that is a priority for the health of our students. I think that's just as important as bullying. I mean, it's almost the same thing sometimes. So
So do you want that to be on the list? Technology?
Yeah. Collect identity protected information about our student body. What is YRBS? Okay. And make the district level decisions going forward. You threw this one in there.
no, yeah, I did. But it was we talked about it. It came up. The YRBS came up in our goals meeting, and I put it in there because I think to your point, how much does our community, do our parents, how much are they aware of what is happening in middle school among our kids?
Right.
And if our kids are spending a lot of time outside of school on their phones, there's a lot that's happening that parents don't know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's tied to this. And I'm not saying this has to be in there, but that came up in our meeting, and so I was.
Would it fall under technology? I mean, that's kind of holistic, though, right?
Yeah, it's a survey that is anonymous, but it's asking more about youth risk behaviors, and so it's like, what are kids doing? Nationally normed, and I mean actual information. You know, my school does it, and it's, you know, I think it's sort of, it's all anonymous, and so is the actual data. You know, students could be kind of messing with their answers, but to see the trend over several years, you can definitely see that things either go up or go down, and it's an interesting way to get a feel for what our
Is the
community
board
is.
comfortable supporting that?
I think we'd have to probably have more information about it, and maybe that would come from the administration about what it is. And
Maybe we can leave it on there, and if we don't do it, we don't do it, or whatever.
That's fine with me.
Is everybody okay leaving it on there?
But I feel like it could be used to inform the bullying and the technology, and it could be a good source of information, data that we could.
Is everybody okay just leaving it for now?
Is there a better way to word that, or is that wording okay?
All right.
It sounds kind of sketchy.
It's a little bit.
Identity protected information.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
Looking at this list, right, we have, so 4 is one, like, it looks like a very short list, until you look at what's involved. Like 4 is like,
For years report.
this is a huge item, right? But these are the board level things, like we're gonna expand the building, that's the board's problem.
Yeah.
A high school contract, that's the board's problem.
Gotcha.
You know, the tweaks and the changes, you know, that might be the difference from 30,000 feet to 20,000 feet to 15,000 feet.
Yeah.
And we've said over the years, we need to always try to get back up to 30,000 feet. So, I mean, we have a very short list with some very heavy items on it. Your comment about number 1.
Yeah.
Number 1 is tied to 3. Right? We can't accomplish 3 until we accomplish 1 and vice versa.
Right.
So, I mean, your physical plant is inclusive of identifying, you have to answer these questions. So, we can't produce a warrant article unless we keep, the first thing that's going to happen is how many square feet, what's it need to have in it, what's it going to, we have to be able to provide something. Like,
Yeah.
is it a glass tower? Is it a concrete box?
Right.
Is it 5 classrooms, is it 50 classrooms?
So
So
I think-
they live together. Those
yeah,
are the
I think we have a lot of good discussions around these topics. These are hot topics for us. The question is whether or not these are the topics we want to have a discussion about and work towards for the next year. Not necessarily right now. I am comfortable with the edits to number 4. Ken, you said you had some language.
Yeah, I think I got something worked out.
On what would you like to change?
If I can hand this over to you.
Well, read it out loud.
So, no, I'll read it out loud. But, determine and implement the next steps in the process for advancing the design and construction of additional educational space. Doesn't specify creating a warrant article, but we know we're going to have to get there as part of the next step to do that. But it's the determine and implement part that is the key to that goal.
Is the board okay with that change?
Sure.
Okay. So,
Sounds good.
based on that discussion, being entirely transparent that we have a lot of discussions around 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 1, and 1, and
Which one? And 3.
it's something, and 3. Is the board okay with these goals as amended? I think we need to adopt our goals so that we can then have our crazy conversations.
So, yes, but the second side of it for me is, I think the board needs to set timelines on itself. So, we need to create a-
They should not be in the goals.
No, but I'm saying, if we adopt the goals, the very next thing, or at the next meeting, is we need to adopt a timeline and hold ourselves responsible for our own goals.
All right, so I would entertain a motion to adopt the goals as amended.
So, we don't have.
That was Gigi. Her first so moved.
Hey, you know what, boom.
I need a second.
Second.
All right. Any additional discussion on the adoption of the board goals as amended from our first pizza scene? This is the pizza guy. All in favor? Aye. We are done with goals.
I would move to take a
Pizza break?
pizza break.
Everyone okay? 7:17. A break for dinner.
Yes.
All right. We left off with traffic control. I think we had.
Before we move on, Zach had a good point about setting a time schedule. Is that coming up later?
That is
Setting
not-
deadlines for ourselves?
That is not coming up tonight. I think that will come up at the next meeting.
You think it will?
I think it will. Let's put it on the agenda for the next
So I
meeting.
won't be at the next meeting, but Nate, can you please set a hard goal and hard points for us?
I will do what I can do, Zach.
Okay, thank you.
Traffic control.
May I, sir?
Go right ahead.
I was asked to at least inquire with the state about possibilities of having some sort of light added up at the end of the road. I spoke with DOT and very nicely was told not going to happen. They suggested hiring a certified flagger.
What an idea.
They also mentioned that Exeter does it at the high school. And there's actually a big commercial complex in Stratham, and they do it at the end of the day, so that all the workers can pull out on the 111, you said?
Yep.
Amongst a bunch of other places, but Exeter was an example of a school that does it. Because then you can be certified if they're working on the state road, basically rating 470 already.
All right. So that leaves us with the option of looking at somebody to stand at the end of the driveway.
I have not received any inquiries. You can put it out to the public and see if there's somebody interested in.
Okay.
How long is the traffic backup?
Our buses are getting in and
You're looking at like probably I mean, I guess you could say an hour. Like, if you would want, I don't know if you could pay somebody about 45 minutes, but
No, so like I think a 4-hour minimum if you're gonna hire someone.
right. So I would say you're looking at paying somebody 5 hours a week.
Can I ask just a ludicrous stupid question?
Sure.
What I do best?
Say one stop there.
Hold on, I gotta be honest with you. Can we use that as like, what's our day rate for a substitute?
What is it, 275? Or 80? 80 this year.
Is there a way, can we half day sub? Is that, so what would that be, like 50 for a half day?
Half is 80.
Well, I didn't know if they got a little bit extra, get here and get home, like, I'm just,
Business world.
I couldn't remember.
we're taking them,
No land.
we're taking them 52 cents a mile, I don't know. Is that a way for us to achieve the objective, is to see if any of our substitutes that are on the list would want to be subs to be,
Did you say a substitute list?
I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, yeah, we're
Four
not.
people
You guys
long.
don't have
Four people, I think we have 4 people.
I said it was a stupid question.
It's not a stupid question at all.
You can reply back with, Zach, you're an idiot. I'm okay with it.
It's bus drivers, subs, and paras are very challenging to find these days because what happens during the gig economy.
That's why with the current employee, we wouldn't need to pay the 4 hours because they're already working for us and we could do that as either a stipend or an extra.
And there's nobody who wants a little extra money to go out there for
We call that
half hour at the end of the
walkabout.
day,
So I was exactly saying it has to be a certain, like, that's a.
which it's not a big deal. I think it's an
It was
online, it's an online
from
thing.
this guy at the state, it wasn't the,
The hardest test.
no, I think he indicated it's an attainable goal.
I had Amber call our liability company to ask about it, and they said that they could send someone out to train if we ended up going that direction, because they would need to be trained.
Yeah.
Nobody needs walkabout mine?
I can put it back out there.
I think at minimum, we just keep it out there and we just keep hoping that somebody expresses interest in it.
Afternoon is definitely not as bad.
Another suggestion that was forwarded to me.
And it also depends on the time of year. You know, it's like, right now we have a lot of sports kids, so there's not as many pickups. But in the winter, there's more, you know, it's kind of, it's hit or miss. And it depends on how fast. Sometimes we get all the walker car riders out before the buses are even ready to go. You know, it just depends on the amount of kids being picked up. So,
If parent drop-off were to start 5 minutes earlier, would that help?
because it's contractually that.
Okay. So we're gonna put word out there that anybody wants to do it, and we'll see what comes in there. That's traffic control. JCA, change in school assignments. Is this red line the one that?
Yep, this is the one that we reviewed last time and talked through your current policy, and I handed out the red line version for your consideration.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think the closer that we get to the school board sample, the better off, because it tends to speak to the ed rules and the statute, which is what we should be following anyway. And I think when we deviated and had the lottery policy, that was not in the spirit of the law. And when we had and with the current policy, you provide a form, like it's just an application process, which is not appropriate either. I think if you use this policy that's been vetted with our attorney, and we, as the policy states, develop procedures, then it's a level playing field, it's fair, everyone understands why they may or may not qualify for an assignment, and it will be a cleaner process.
I move to move the policy JCA with the changes in the red line version.
Second.
Discussion on JCA.
There's a term in section B4, best interest. Is there a definition of that best interest beyond what's just spelled out in B, which doesn't really?
That's where the procedures would come into place, or the considerations. So you would work on coming up with a list so that people would understand the types of things that you would consider to determine whether there's any student
So should those be as part of the policy?
They may or may not be. If you approve this policy, I'll work with the attorney to come up with the policies and procedures that go along with it.
Okay.
Any additional discussion?
When we look at section C, the tuition. Obviously, transportation is not included. Is there, can we say that, our exposure is only the cost of what we would pay for a high school student? Can we?
You can't. By law, if you agree to reassign a student, you have to pay whatever the tuition would be. So you can refuse the reassignment. I can bring it to you and say, the superintendent has agreed in the other district to accept our student. I'm recommending it, that it is in the student's best interest. The tuition has been established at $14,000. So you can't say, no, we'll only send what we send sponsors. That's illegal. You approve the assignment, you approve it. But you could say, no, I'm not approving your recommendation. You have the final vote, but it can't be because of the tuition.
But is that flying in the face of that best interest number? Because I'm just playing devil's advocate here. More so than that.
How would it fly in the face of best interest of the student?
I guess I'm looking at the two different representations. So the best interest, and again, I'm not advocating for anything, I'm just playing devil's advocate. Best interest for the student is one thing. If you're representing the best interest of the taxpayers, that isn't necessarily.
That's not what this policy is about.
And I'm not.
You're either agreeing that this is it's in the best interest of the student to go to another school or not. It's not about how much it's going to cost.
Any additional discussion on JCA? All in favor of adopting JCA as presented?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. All right. Informational items. Mr. Oxnard, you wanted to talk about the YMCA.
No, you
Oh,
said
we
next
pushed
time.
it off. I'm sorry.
You said no.
I said no. Sorry. Public comments.
So, Max Thompson. I was thinking about during the school board goals, you talked a lot about what the community wanted, but you didn't seem to discuss how you were going to find out what the community wanted. So what I'm thinking is sometime within any scheduling limitations you may have, you should establish a school board meeting for students that have gone from DCS to any high school. They can come to this meeting and give their perspective on their high school program and kind of give a comparison of other high schools to Concord, and off that they would give this as a presentation to the community of parents, whoever would agree to come, and the way of informing the community of this meeting would be up to you. Personally, I would recommend email, but that was just me. Anyways, moving on from that. So, we would then use this and have the parents have their input of how they would like to proceed with high school placement and the high school contract.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a comment. You're not correct in saying that no one who had a high school student prior to the Concord contract has experienced both, because I'm the living embodiment of that. To date myself, my stepson was a freshman in high school when I moved to Deerfield. It was prior to the Concord contract. I went through finding a placement for him, and it was totally different coming from Massachusetts. If you want to talk about it being one way to another. I will acknowledge he did not attend DCS, so he did not have a pre-existing structure of friends. So we were not faced with, did he get into the same school as his friends, did he not get into the same school. We were presented with, you need to go find a high school. We made the decision based on the priorities, really for the student himself. Having experienced that, and yes, I did, not to date myself, in this past year, facing 20 years down the road, junior being a freshman, experiencing what the situation is now, I think you need to know, one, if I could go back in time, I would go back 20 years and do that all over again. I've had more discussions with attorneys in the last 6 months of my life than I have in your average 10-year span. And I will do what I need to do to make sure he's okay. I have gone through more heartache and BS in the last year than I ever experienced with my stepson. So I understand there's a contingent of people, and not to acknowledge that there was heartache. Absolutely, if a family could not find a placement for their child, that is something to be acknowledged and learned from. However, to say because it didn't work exactly the way that it was done 20 years ago, people should go, oh, it was really bad, and especially the people online, you love to go, oh, the complainers, they don't realize how good they have it. You know what? Just like when our parents went to school, it's different now. When we went to school, it's different now, and it's different for them. How it is today is different than it was 20 years ago. And just because the other process wasn't perfect for everyone doesn't mean that you shouldn't adjust it and change it, because this process is horrible. And generally the attitude in town is pretty much believed your last name dictates where your child gets a placement or whether you're going to get approved for a different placement, more so than the needs of your students, because there are plenty of people, and you need to acknowledge there's a lot of people who go to bed crying over concerns of what their children are going through. And Concord was not a fit for everybody. It doesn't mean it's not a fit for some, it doesn't mean that other people didn't have valid arguments before, but those arguments should not be dictated by everybody now. It wasn't so horrible for everyone. It was be fun.
Any other public comments? Eric? Non-public, as per NHRSA 91-A:32C, would entertain a motion to go into non-public.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. We are going to go into non-public at 7:47. Yeah.